Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Matt Brown, and we have a new segment today. Dental Unfiltered is adding two new segments. One is Clinical Unfiltered with Dr. Sasha, and one is going to be called Management Unfiltered with Zach Shelley. And we wanted to create two new segments that we think are kind of missing out there. One being clinical for clinical geek stuff, like, we all like technology and all the new clinical stuff and the innovations. And the other, we think that managers are really neglected for good podcasts, and docs are listening to this right now. And doc, this is a resource for your managers to get extra access to things they may not know is out there, things that they are not aware of, or things that are changing. And Zach is a honestly young, aggressive new office manager running a super office, and he has a lot to offer. He speaks at ADOM, and he's a rising star in the management section. He has a really good Facebook group with lots of resources, and we wanted to create a show for Zach that's a couple times a month that is just for managers, so docs can share that to their managers, and managers can start listening to Dental Unfiltered and Management Unfiltered and start getting the same resources doc is getting. So Zach's here with me today. Today's the first episode. This is going to be under Management Unfiltered, and today we're going to find out from Zach kind of what his plans are, what his intentions are, how excited he is about it, and kind of what his mission is in this new podcast segment on Dental Unfiltered, focused on resources for managers. So Zach, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself? You've been on before,
Yeah,
and tell a little bit about like what's got you excited about doing this show for managers.
yeah, absolutely, Matt. So a little bit about me. One thing I think Matt and I clicked on is we're two outliers in the dental industry that
Yeah,
our
totally agree.
previous
Yeah.
careers should have never placed us where we're at, right? So before dentistry, I was a professional skateboarder, traveled the country, competed all the time. That was my life, was just skateboarding. Come to 2009, I came into the dental field as a dental technician, creating dental prosthetics from everything from, partials, flippers to full arch cases, screw retain cases, all on fours, crown and bridge, CAD, 3D printing, all that fun stuff. And in 2020, a doc reached out to me, and this will kind of segue us, Matt, into kind of why it's so important to have a practice manager and why this podcast is going to be great for not only owner docs, but for practice managers also to work alongside this. Is he had this huge, beautiful office and had no practice manager. We've got 23 ops. We have 5 doctors here now, and he had nobody running this. So in 2020, he reached out and he's like, "Hey, you ever take lunch?" And I was like, "That's kind of a loaded question, but yeah, I take lunch. Let's meet." And then the next text was, "It's dental related." And sure enough, we go to lunch. He offers me the position to run his practice, and he just told me, like, "Listen, I'm drowning." Most important, thing for a practice is to have somebody effectively running the show, because a dentist needs to be in the chair. He needs to have a patient in the chair cutting teeth, seeing patients. And there's so many inefficiencies that come into a practice when you don't have somebody looking at everything and making sure it's running smoothly, and the owner doc is able to, produce, and also have those relationships with associates too, to make sure that they're also producing and have everything they need. Like, you can't, it's my opinion, you can't effectively run a practice, at least of our size, and be a dentist,
No.
do both. It's just not possible. So this is the big point of, like, I want to come in just like my owner doc did and said, "Hey, I'm going to give you all these, educational resources, all these things for you to go and learn about dentistry, learn about efficiencies, get into organizations like you said of ADOM, but let's bring this into the show and let's teach everybody, like, what are other office managers doing that are winning and totally crushing the industry, and why is that happening?" And Matt, I know that you get to talk a lot of docs and seeing things like the struggle's real, right, with them having somebody come in and run things.
There's a couple struggles. I feel bad for owner docs in a lot of ways. You go through 10 years of schooling, you get no business training, no management training, and then docs hire office managers like in one of two camps. First camp that's real common is I hire this person to insulate me from all those things I don't know about that I don't want to do. The second camp is I hire this person to execute the way I want these things executed with my fundamental understanding of these things. And I feel like a lot of docs fall into the first one. They place so much trust in this individual. And I don't think managers have negative intentions rarely. I think it's very rare, right? But I think that they don't really understand what doc wants out of it either. And maybe they're making decisions and processes and stuff that doesn't really support what doc wants, and doc doesn't realize it. And it's a lot of going backwards to fix going forwards. So, it's I think it's a tough relationship because I think, and you work in a practice every day, so you can tell me like I think you're full of it and call me out on it. I think the manager has a better understanding of what doc does than the doc has an understanding of what the manager does.
Yeah, 100%.
I think it's very skewed. I think if you ask the manager, like, give me a full view of the practice, they could explain a lot of things and give a really full view because these women are on the ground, they're on the front lines, they're doing it
Hmm.
right, and they're right
Yeah.
alongside Doc all the time, and a lot of them were DAs and stuff. I feel like if you ask Doc, give me a full picture of your practice, there's gonna be subjects he gets to and says you have to ask my manager about it.
Hmm.
And I feel like she has a great view of the practice, he has a skewed view of the practice, and it makes things very tough. And I think there has to be some resource for like kind of like explaining what that relationship should be like.
Yeah, 100%. I just talked to our owner doc the other day, and he's like, I've gotten to the point where he's like, I don't know anything in the practice anymore. And he's like, because I know and I trust that my OM's got everything taken care of. And there's things that the doctor, he says, now I can go, I can sit in the chair, I can cut teeth, I can treat my patients, and I know that my office manager's taking care of everything. But that's one thing, like you said, like it takes time to build this relationship. It takes time to build these, these guidelines and these rules and figuring out what the owner doc wants done exactly. But then it also takes time, like you guys coming together and saying, one, what does success look like? What do these systems look like? And, you said you want X, Y, and Z. How are we actually going to execute that and make that happen? And I found it really interesting because it brings me a lot of joy when he's like, I have no clue. You got to ask him. And because we know our space of where we each need to be and making the practice successful. But then we also, like tomorrow, we drop into like a 3.5 hour meeting of yearly planning where we both look at everything, all of our systems, all our trainings. What are we doing for the year? How are we making sure our teams are successful and talking about, okay, I want to see this happen. This is what I'm vocalizing. Now, Zach, you tell me once I've told you that, how do we actually make that come to fruition and make that plan happen? And I think that's where that balance with OM and doc needs to have, because they need to be open enough to say, hey, this is what I want to see, but they also got to be able to receive, okay, as the OM, do they have enough knowledge to know, okay, how to execute this and make it happen exactly how they want to? So you've got to learn as an office manager to hear that and be able to communicate back to them and trust that, it's going to happen.
And I think even that, a yearly planning meeting, I think about all the practices I work with,
Mhm.
I don't know if they have those meetings. Like I don't know if like I feel like it's just like we're gonna go through the year and the year clicks off, or through the next year the year clicks off is kind of the culture.
Yeah,
And the planning and execution part of it, I don't know if it really happens the way you're describing. So
correct. Yeah.
that's really critical. So, you know, you're gonna launch this new episode on podcast. This is episode 1,
Yeah.
right? So what are some like some things that you want to shed light on and bring to the audience to help
Mhm.
them kind of get where you are with your doc manager relationship?
Biggest thing is one, like we've talked about it a little bit, Matt, like teaching that follow the leader course, right? Like getting a mindset of where you have the owner doc and the office manager in such a tight knit relationship that when I am saying something, they know it's coming from the owner also. I am him, he is me, we are the same person, and learning how to build that relationship. So I'm really excited to start teaching people and talking about like, hey, how do we build that to where your team will actually follow you because you're speaking as if you're the owner of the practice, taking that ownership as the office manager, and also learning how to just empower your teams to actually get them to do what you need them to do, but also have good culture in doing it. Because we hear all these times, like, you have an office manager, like, man, I hate them just because they're so rude. They demand what I do. And it doesn't need to be that way. And then another big struggle in dentistry, and I just talked about it the other day, is we make things so difficult on ourselves in dentistry, period. And I think us as OMs can simplify structures and plans and systems in the practice that we can make it way simpler and more effective all at the same time.
That relationship does take time to build,
Mhm.
right? And it takes time to really get on the same page, right?
Yeah.
What do you think the maturing timeline is of a new office and doc owner situation? Like how long do you think it takes for that, like for them to feel everything out, get to know each other, and start building these structures and meetings to
Yeah.
get to that successful point?
Success starts right from day one, right, Matt? Like, because you talked, like, there's so many offices that just don't even do annual meetings. We do monthly meetings with the owner, and I go over every bit of the practice from the nitty gritty all the way down to, big picture stuff. And it's super important to start that at the beginning. And I mean, with Jonathan and I, we've gotten to the point, I've been working with him almost 5 years at this practice, but I would say it took a solid like 2 years before I knew, like, okay, I don't even have to talk to him about this decision because I know the answer and I know exactly what I need to do. But that's not to scare people away. Like, man, you got 2 years of like grinding ahead. It was 2 years of just building and building and building and listening to what he says he wants done, how he wants it done, and then providing feedback and saying, hey, I saw that you wanted this, but we actually add this in here also, and it's way more effective. And knowing I can confidently go in and put caveats or little audibles in here or say, hey, this actually isn't a good idea, and I'm going to tell you why, and we talk about it. So it takes a little bit of time, but you got to have, like Brene Brown says in her book, she's like, you have to have these like little battles, right? You may feel inside like this conversation is going to go one way, but it goes a complete opposite way of what you didn't expect. And most of the time, the good way. You've got to be confident to go up to your doc and just say, hey, these are the things I'm seeing. This is how I think we can fix it. I know you wanted it this way, but this is a problem. And have that confidence in that conversation. But it definitely takes time because you're going to have some resistance back and forth. But as you start seeing that product come and your revenue start to increase, you're going to be like, okay, yeah, that's actually working, and I'm going to listen to them.
Now, listen, on the doc side,
Yeah.
right? Because listen, it's two, right? Like it's
Yeah.
two, like
Yeah.
it's two, right?
Yep.
So on the doc side, what would you tell doc about like, hey, your new office manager, if you gave a doc a few words of advice of how to navigate this new office manager they got, what would you tell doc?
Yeah. So you need to learn and you need to be okay to back up, and you need to let that OM step in. Now, there's give and take with it. Like, I'm not saying blindly walk away and don't look at anything, but you do need to give that value to the OM as if they're able to make decisions, and you need to back them up all day long. Even if it's a decision, maybe it's one of those you're like, oh, I may have done it this way. Like, this isn't wrong. And another team member comes up and says, hey, why are they doing it? You say, that's because that's how I asked them to do it. And if you need to evolve that plan a bit, but do not go against your OM. You two are a team. And if you're not backing your OM, they're not going to want to go to bat for you, and vice versa. If they're not going to back you up, you guys aren't going to work together. So you have to set the standard and just say, these are my expectations and this is what I'm going to do with you. And the other thing is support your OM with as much education as they need, as long as it's effective and applicable to the industry. So I'm not saying blindly go, just let them take whatever courses they want. But if they're like, hey, this would really help me, hear them out. It is worth every penny of your investment.
What resources, like, so if I was a doc listening to this right now
Yeah.
and I wanted to build like stud manager,
Yeah.
what resources should I invest in for my manager?
So big one is ADOM because there's just a ton of education, ton of CE, and you get it from a well-rounded group of people that are, in the education platform and dentistry. And then I would dig apart and look at clinical courses you're going to for yourself. Like, I've gone and I've taken perio courses with our docs that are 100% clinical, has nothing to do with management, but understanding perio on a whole other level as a hygienist has helped me learn strategies of what hygienists are doing and what they're not doing and how to implement and say, hey, these are where we're missing the mark. I've taken organizational leadership through Harvard Business School, which was, I'm not saying send them to Harvard, but there are business courses that you can take that are a year, 2, 3 years long, depending on what you're wanting to plan, that will give them a full rounded view of, how you actually run a business, how you scale it, what it actually looks like to look at market strategies and what's happening in your industry to make the correct decisions moving forward. If they don't hold their either RDA or EFDA as an OM, it's super valuable because you're training everyone. You're looking for things that are being done correctly or incorrectly. And if they don't hold certain certifications, it doesn't hold as much weight when they come in and say, hey, I really need you to be doing it this way, or I need you to be doing this. So I went back to school. I got my radiology and my expanded functions at University of Florida, which was a great program. And it just extended my clinical knowledge because it's really, really important that you understand the entire office. It's not just front desk and insurance, checking patients in and out and sending claims, and then talking to the marketing agency and saying, hey, I need more new patients. It's also understanding, why did we do that crown? Why did insurance deny it? And then you're like, hey, I can see recurrent decay on the distal. This crown's more than 5 years old. We have more than 50% tooth structure loss, and I can show them on the radiograph pointed out, and you don't even have to snag the doctor. And it makes your office manager way more efficient. And then you can also sit in there as the OM and say, hey guys, this is why we need it. And this is not what's being done. And this is how we're going to tackle it moving forward. And this is why. And when your OM is well-rounded and knows both sides of dentistry, they're going to crush it for you. One, because they love it. They have all the knowledge space, and they feel empowered because they're like, dude, I mean, you can look right behind me. This is all the stuff. I'm super proud of it. I have it behind me all the time because I worked super hard for it. But it gave me all that knowledge base to understand dentistry inside and outside. And we do it every year. We do different courses. So training is key, CE is key, and empower them as much as they're willing to run with it.
Do you ever find like I could just see this happening? You have an associate working in the practice,
Yeah.
and you guys are looking at a radiograph, and you're pointing something out to him, like,
Yeah.
"Hey, this patient's coming in right now, and this is the deal right here."
Hmm.
Do you ever feel like docs like, slow down, OM, chill out, and look on the X-rays? No.
No, not at all.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Everybody who's listening, hear me out. That's not every practice, right? I've built a really good, close relationship with our associates and owner docs. So they're used to me being able to say, hey, we're looking at this. But I also don't walk in and tell the patient what they need before the doctor's actually diagnosed. So that's another big thing, is
That's a
like, I told them they
bad
need a
idea.
crown. You can't do that. So I'll go in and just say, hey, it looks like they've got some decay going on the distal. That's where they're having pain. I'm pretty sure that's a tooth. You let me know what you want to do. And then you put it right in their book. You just say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. And this, I'm pointing it out to you, on the radiograph, so you know where to look. And it's not me trying to do your job. It's just like, hey, I'm doing my due diligence. This is what they're telling me. This is what we see on the x-ray. Or say we're using AI in our imagery, it's populating it right there. So we're both seeing it right off the bat. And then say, hey, doc, tell me what you want me to do. I'll meet you in the room. And then move forward and say, okay, thank you. So a lot of it has to do with approach. And we'll talk about that in future episodes of like how we actually have a good approach talking to our owner docs, and vice versa, to make sure that we're getting things taken care of. Because the last thing you want is an OM that doesn't want to do anything for you because you guys don't have that good relationship. And I think that's one of the big cores to this whole reason we're doing this, is there's a big disconnect.
So I know you're gonna have a lot of guests and stuff on. I imagine you'll have some companies coming on as well.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of like the guest episodes and some of the subjects that you want to cover as you kind of take through doing this?
Yeah, so the next episode we're filming here in a few short days. I'm super excited because this OM has actually it's talk all about scaling and what that looks like, because she has taken a single like ortho practice, single docs, to now multiple providers, multiple locations, and she runs the show. Like, and working through like, how do you get from small practice to blowing up to an absolute super practice, right? Multiple locations, multiple shifts, multiple teams, which is crazy. It's a ton to manage. Like, how do you get there?
Every shift in a team is like another practice to
Exactly.
manage, right?
Yeah.
So it's like if you run like I have a practice in SLC, really long-term client of ours I like a lot. And they
Yeah.
run 2 7-hour shifts back to back.
Yeah.
That's 2 practices.
It is 100% of
It's
that
one
episode.
space, but it's two
Yeah.
practices.
It is 100%. And
Yeah, 100%.
it's so hard to manage that. And when you do it effectively, like, not only do they do it effectively, but everybody enjoys working there. Like, I talk to them all the time. I come over and they're always smiling. They're always having a good time. Like, how do you create that culture? But then also, how do you like trust an OM to come in and do this, right? Like, it's a lot of responsibility, and there's a lot on the line to get these other practices up and running, and making sure everything's rolling how it should be rolling. And she also works part-time remote, so it's like, how do you function that? Because that's getting super popular, right? Is remote employees and things like that, which how does that function? How do you continue that rhetoric with the doctor, making sure that they're confident that their practice is growing in the direction they want to? Because you could grow year over year, but is it really maximize how much you can actually grow?
And I think part of it too, like you said, like there's you have to trust this OM to do it, right? You got to be
Mm-hmm.
involved. Like,
Yeah.
it's not hands off.
Nope.
It's you're a team running the practice, and then she actually executes, right?
Yep. 100%.
I think part of it is it's like you have to look at where you're at and say, I'm not getting what I want out of this.
Yeah.
So it's okay to ask for help in these scenarios. And you hire this OM and you're asking her for help. Let him or her let
Mm-hmm.
them help. Like, let
Yeah.
them actually do this stuff. And they're gonna fail. Like, everyone fails. Like,
Oh,
here at
100%.
Energize, we have me and Ryan, both our business partners. We fail at our own things. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
I'll come to him and say, hey man, I tried this and I jacked it up. Or I'll come to me and say, hey bro, you might be better off doing this than me, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I think
No.
that's a big part of the growth process. Is like, you find where you're vulnerable and where you're not good at it, right? But I think
Yeah.
part of it is like, Doc has to let the OM fail for
Mm-hmm.
those experiences to happen, right? For you to learn.
For sure. Yeah, there's times I'll admit it all day long. I mean, I made mistakes from, first couple weeks in, just because it's such a shock and a change. But we also had the discussion, like, I don't know what this job's going to look like and we're going to just let it evolve, and we're going to figure it out as it goes. And that was kind of our understanding. Like, it was, we always say, it's funny, I got a Google Doc, and it was like, all these things that he wants me to do, which is, basic things, make sure payrolls run on time, staffing, hiring, firing, make sure everybody's trained where they need to be trained. These are different, re-credentialing and renegotiations on insurances, all the normal grounds. But then we always laugh about it because it still comes up to this day as a line just says other duties as assigned, because there's crap that comes up all the time that you don't even know or expect to come up, and you just have to be open and willing to do that. So having that, like, I'm going to give you this project and let them roll with it, also helps you understand how they approach these systems, how they approach these problems, and whether or not they're going to be successful in certain areas. Because there's things all day long I'm like, one, you're better at this and I don't even really care to do it. So teach your OM to also delegate responsibilities to really strong team members that can handle these things. Because just because you're OM doesn't mean you do everything. That's not, and that's a big misconception. And the other thing is too, is like, is your OM a true OM, or are they kind of more of a hybrid OM where they are still working up front, answering the phones, entering insurances? Because that does change a little bit of how things look, because that does limit your effectiveness because you're still relied on up front. Whereas my position, I'm not up front. I don't sit up front and answer the phone calls and all that stuff. I'm truly running all the operations of the practice day to day.
I tend to not mind the hybrid OM scenario. Like, so if
Yeah.
we're doing like 120 a month, right? Like we're
Hmm.
a smaller to medium sized practice, and we have this hybrid OM. It's not a bad idea, but I think you have to have a growth goal set of when that
Correct.
person is not a hybrid OM and becomes a true OM.
Hmm.
And you have to have a threshold of when this stops. And
Hmm.
it's like, all right, so we're gonna go from 120 to 150, right? When we hit 150, you got to stop. So when we start hitting 140s, you have to start planning to replace those positions you're fulfilling.
Yep.
I find docs that go, well, she's like the front desk manager and the office manager. And then they want to grow to a certain point. Well, I mean, a big part of your growth barrier is going to be is that if your office manager is answering the phones and talking to patients,
Hmm.
that's going to be a big growth barrier because that's going to
Yeah.
eat up a lot of time. She's not going to
Ton
execute the
of
way you
time.
want. So I think the hybrid scenario works when you're at a certain revenue point, right?
Yeah, I agree
But I think
100%.
you have to have it this is when you become full OM. Like you have to have a definite finish line for when that changes.
And I think that's like goes right back to that, like, that expectation role, right? Like, this is what I expect you to be at here. But once we get to this point, because if the owner doc's realizing that and making that mark for the OM, then they're going to be like, okay, he realizes once I get to this point, it's not practical to do both. And then they feel that support, right? Because otherwise it's like he doesn't care, he's saving another buck because he can have that dual role paying one person doing it. But once again, owner docs should realize real quick the effectiveness of what he's actually getting for what he's paying for.
Like I think that maybe we all perceive the docs trying to save a buck by keeping that role
Yeah,
that way and trying to do more revenue. I think what it is, I don't think doc knows how to transition that.
yeah, for
I,
sure.
I don't I don't think doc I really don't think like I don't like maybe some docs are,
Yeah.
but I think most docs want to do what's best for their business, right? And if they
Hmm.
knew like I have to transition her this way to full OM, they would do
Yeah.
it. I feel like they're waiting for her to do it,
Yeah.
and then she's sitting there, or him or whoever this OM is, right?
Yeah.
And they're saying, "Man, we're doing 145 a month. When is this doc going to tell me? Like we've gone up 30 grand a month in revenue since I got here. When's this doc going to tell me it's time for me to be a full OM?" And they're
Yeah.
both like waiting for this conversation.
For sure. And I think that's where we get back into like what I was telling you, like it starts day one, right? Having these
Yeah.
meetings, having these conversations starts day one. So when you do get to that point, you're like, hey, doc, we're up, 40 grand a month in revenue. We need to start thinking about this change. Pause. And then I've already planted the seed as far as a position opening. This is what I've laid out. I have a couple applicants. What are you looking for in this position? And then there's your transition, right? So then that communication is always going, but it's got to start. So if it hasn't started since day one, like day one needs to be today. You need to sit down and say, hey, this is how we're going to start working things. This is how we're going to start communicating. Because you said it perfectly, and I'm even guilty of saying it all the time. Owner docs want to save a dollar, but that might not be what their true thing is.
Yeah, I don't know if it really. I talk to docs all
Yeah,
day long, man, and I
yeah,
think there are docs that do,
yeah,
but I think there's like this like Mexican standoff happening of like, when are you going to tell me I can do this? And
yeah.
they're going, when are you going to come to me and tell me that we need to make a change? Because I don't know what the change is. Because the doc isn't on the front lines.
No,
He doesn't know
no.
how much phone calls are up. And honestly, docs listening to this, I'll ask docs all the time, what's your monthly collections? And they'll
Mhm.
make the statement, I'd have to ask my office manager. So
Yeah.
let's say it
It's
moved and they don't
wild.
even know, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if it's so much like I'm sure there are docs trying to save a buck with that,
For
but I
sure.
think
But
there's
that's
a
not everybody.
scenario. It's not everybody. I think there's a scenario of like I'm waiting for doc to tell me, and
Hmm.
doc's going, I'm waiting for my OM to tell me,
Hmm.
and it just isn't happening.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, like, talking with Jonathan, like, before, he was like, practice management was miserable. Like, I hate it. He's like, that's not what I love to do or want to do. Like, yes, running a business is fun and we love it and we love to see the growth, but like, it's painful, it's stressful, and you can't do it all. So now it's like, if I asked him today, like, did you wish you had known him, for the last 15 years before me? And he would say 100%, yes, I wish I had this because of all the things, like, I wish I had this sooner, or I wish I knew this sooner. A lot of these OMs or practice owners, I can guarantee you, once you get this flowing how you want it, you're like, dude, I wish I had this 2 years ago. Like, this would have made my life so much easier. But be thankful you have it now and implement this crap, because you are going to seriously love your life, because you're going to be able to do what you need to do, but also what you want to do, and not feel like you're strained because you know things are getting handled.
Well, I think part of it too is like there's like two levels for doc, right? One level is I want to make oodles of money, which everyone
Yeah.
does. The other level is you got into dentistry for a reason and you made it through school, and there's some kind of clinical passion that you have.
Hmm.
And I find docs like, man, I want to spend more time on my clinical passion, whether it's Invisalign or veneers or implants. And if I'm doing this other stuff over here, it makes it hard to do this over here. Me and my wife have a thing. We always talk about how our job is to enable each other's dreams. Like I like to do lots of
Yeah.
outdoor stuff, so does she. We like a little bit
Awesome.
different outdoor stuff. We try to enable each other's dreams, right? And I think like the real job of the office manager is to help the doc facilitate and see those things come to fruition. That I'm
Hmm.
doing more implants and I'm focusing more on these things. Now the
Yeah.
practice is organized and at a point where we could add on an associate.
Yeah.
Like they kind of build it's kind of like I'm a big F1 fan. It's kind of like an
Hmm.
F1 race team.
Yeah.
Like Doc's the driver. But if you don't have the head technician, the head mechanic, the guy filling the gas tank, then the car doesn't go down the road,
Hmm.
right? I think
Yeah.
a lot of these cars are going down the road and they've got these giant, awesome engines in them, but
Hmm.
they're not fueled up all the way, or the
Yeah.
tires are low on air and they can't perform. And I feel like you get the right OM in there or like pit mechanic or whatever, and they say, hey, this thing can go a lot faster. Let's
Yeah.
just make these changes. And for them to be able to say that, they have to be empowered to say it.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think the same too, like, on the other side of it, Matt, right? Like, Jonathan could see I have the passion, one, for learning. Now I felt like I was stunted for many years. I didn't have, that ability to, jump and dive into all the education I do now. But like, he's like, we were talking the other day and he's like, we wrote a course actually for our office that I'm going to teach this week. And we were talking about it and he's like, I just saw how excited you got about writing this and talking about this and how passionate you were. He's like, that's what I want to see from my team. Like, let's train them too and get them excited and them passionate about it. So like, when I have the ability to really love what I do and learn about what I love also, which is making the practice as efficient and profitable as possible, then it's contagious. Like, your doc, he's empowered to have his clinical side. I'm empowered to have my management side. And then you're like, I want to teach my whole team all of this. Like, I want to give, give, give. And what you end up turning out to find is like, you have this culture that's just like continually to grow, and you're like, can it get any better than this? And you're like, well, it can keep going, right? And you want a team that's like, my OM's awesome, I love them because they hear me, they support me, and they empower me. And then the OM saying, the owner doc hears me, listens to me, and empowers me, and vice versa. And I think once you reach that point, you have an unstoppable dental practice.
I think you also hit on another point, and we have to wrap it up here in a few minutes.
Yeah.
But you hit on another point that, you know, coaching, leadership, all those positions where you're transmitting knowledge to someone else,
Yeah.
the key to it is the transfer of emotion,
Yeah.
right? And docs tend to not be those people,
Yeah.
right? And it's okay to be like I had a doc a long time ago that he just knew it. He just said, "Man, I'm not a leader and I'm not a high energy guy. I come in, I forget to say hi to most of my team, and I don't mean to. I just don't."
Yeah.
He was a really sweet doc actually. I really liked the guy. He was out in Wisconsin. I really enjoyed him. He just
Mhm.
couldn't. It was like he was stage fright whenever he was talking to anybody,
Yeah.
and that even was tough. The guy was clinically gifted. I mean, clinically gifted guy,
Yeah.
and that was like something that, um, you know, he kind of struggled with. And if you pick the right OM who's high energy, they should become that person if you want them to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like they can be in morning huddle with you and they can be your hype man.
Oh yeah,
And they
absolutely.
can get the team pumped up, right? And they can be the transfer of emotion. And you can tell them what emotion you want transferred. You can say, listen, I need them excited about doing proper phone calls.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like, proper phone technique is really important right now.
yeah,
Cool. I'll get them pumped up about that.
yeah,
That's perfect.
yeah. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head when it's to transfer emotion, but just be careful, docs, when you're listening to this. Don't go in tomorrow a completely different person because they're going to
Oh,
think you're
that'd
a
be a bad
lunatic.
idea. Yeah.
Really bad idea.
They'd be wondering about
But
mental health.
but you do have to, if you are, wanting to get to that point, like start, it takes a bit of vulnerability and it is uncomfortable at times, but like start sharing with your team, like, this is something I really love. And it can be as simple as, a process on how you do class twos and say, I just really love this matrix system or whatever it is, but just start sharing a little bit about you and some vulnerability. Because that's what people really love, is true, honest to self people. But having that passion and that emotion driven in it, if it's not you, get your OM to do it. And I think you're going to see a ton of success in that.
It's a weird relationship because there's no, like, every other relationship you have in life, mom, dad, sister, brother, wife, girlfriend, you have like these preconceptions of what it should be like from like sitcoms and your own family and your own relationships. But then when you're an OM and an office manager, unfortunately, no point of reference of how this should be.
Yeah.
You don't, right? And it's like there isn't one. It's like, well, how should this be? And I don't think there is a good reference. And I'm hoping that, like, with the advent of this new awesome segment we're doing, we can start shedding light on, like, this is a healthy OM doc relationship, or this is what a successful one has been like. And we'll bring on lots of OMs. And it'd be great to bring on OM and doctor combinations that work together to
Yeah.
talk about it. Would be really cool.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be a great resource where, like, almost like couples counseling for OM and doc, but not really, but kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
like bring on doc and OM that are, running. Like, the one that comes to mind that I was really impressed with once was a guy named Jason Sala. He's out in Nevada. He's got, I mean, like, mega practice. I mean, like 70 employees in one location. I mean, like,
Wow. That's wild.
mega practice. Wild. I mean,
Yeah.
and the guy, if you meet him, he's like, I've met him twice in person. He's just captivating. He's an awesome dude. But, like, I would love to know it. Well, actually, I know because his brother's his manager
Hmm.
and the practice. I met them both on video a bunch of times.
Okay.
And they have like a clear divide of, like, this is your side, this is my side. And
Hmm.
this is the time we interact with each other about each other's sides. And
Yeah.
you can tell the relationship is awesome. Now, they
Yeah.
have a past relationship of being brothers, which can be good and bad,
True.
right? That could go both ways, right? But, like, for a doc to hear, like, oh, well, okay, I never looked at it this way, or I never thought about having the relationship be this way, or I never thought about this relationship at all.
Yeah. Absolutely. It happens with associateships all the time.
Oh, dude, it happens all the time. They hire an associate, they've never had one. Look, well, what's this
Yeah.
supposed to be like? And
Yeah.
then
Exactly.
docs go into this mode of, like, I don't want to give up my good production because then I'm going to make less money,
Yeah.
right? When you should, it's counterproductive to what docs think. You should fill your associates' calendar first.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
You should fill up all your associates, and they should know what you're looking for to hand up to you. And if you do that right, you're busy doing the stuff you want to do, and they are busy not sitting around, and everyone's happy. If you try to cherry pick, it goes the other direction, and they get resentful.
100%. Same goes for your OM. And even if it's things that you like doing, you got better use of your time. Give it to your OM. Let them handle it for you. Just lay out the law of exactly how you want it done.
It could be a lot better. Well, Zach, it's awesome having you on again, and I'm excited to listen to this because I actually never get to listen to our own episodes. I'm too busy.
Yeah.
But your episodes and Dr. Sasha I'm looking forward to, because they're not ones I'm not re-listening to myself, so I'm looking forward to listening to someone else's stuff.
Yeah. There we go.
So I'm super excited about this. Everybody, this will get shared in the Facebook groups. It'll be awesome. All of us now, we have a staff now at Dental Unfiltered. We have 4 hosts now and a production team, and I can tell you that there's no sponsorships, there's no paid anything. Please hit like, subscribe, follow, and leave reviews.
100%.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.